Good morning, everybody. It's what time is it? I don't even know what time it is. In any case, it's time for the show, right? I think it's a little bit after 7 a.m. Let me just share this real fast into my Telegram group, and then we'll get into it. YouTube wants to open Telegram. Yeah, open it. That's fine. Okay, good. So the thing is, as much as YouTube annoys me, and it does annoy me, the thing is, it's so easy to use in terms of live broadcasting. I really wish Odyssey would get good at that, but I think I can talk about cryptocurrency without getting into trouble on here, and that's what we're going to talk about for a few minutes this morning. If you guys come in, maybe we'll have some questions about it. But it's everyone's talking about it because Elon Musk just destroyed Dogecoin overnight, costing it about 30% of its value by doing an SNL skit where he explained cryptocurrency in technical terms, which only people in the market understand, and then he explained it in simpler terms, saying it's a hustle, which is also true, but wasn't necessarily helpful. And if I had to make a bet, I'd bet he made a lot of money last night because since he knew what he was going to say and he knew the market was going to be out there, he could have shorted the market. And by that, I mean he could have bet on Dogecoin to lose money, which was not a crazy bet, all things being equal. The whales were already doing that during this appearance under the idea that, they're selling an asset that doesn't have intrinsic value. So this is where life gets a little interesting. We're going to talk about finance and cultural history, and we're going to talk about currency for one moment. So, money, as I've said multiple times, has two basic attributes, right? It's a store of value and it's an exchange of value, okay? So, it's an exchange of goods. So, the store of value says that my money is inherently worth something because you can buy something else with it. In the old days, it used to be worth gold or silver or other assets. The US dollar, for instance, has historically been backed by the petrodollar, but that ultimately has kind of gone away, and we live in a world of fiat money. So, what is fiat money? It's money that has value because the government says so. In other words, the government uses force of arms to require you to accept money which has no intrinsic value. Some people get money when it's worth a lot. That is at the banks who get to print it for nothing. Some people get money when it's not worth a lot. That's you when you get your paycheck. And so what they do is they get money for free and you work for it and they control you through that way. This is called finance, and finance is all about leverage. It's creating the appearance of value whereby you are able to go ahead and use that leverage if you have enough of the asset to go ahead and control people. So if I was the Federal Reserve and I wanted to print myself $1 million, I could go buy a house even though I didn't do anything. Whereas if you wanted to buy that same house for $1 million, you might have to save and scrimp for 30 years. If it doesn't sound like a very fair system, it sounds like a hustle, then you're right. And that's what Elon Musk was saying in a very clever way last night. He's saying, and he said during his interview, I watched it on Saturday Night Live because I thought it would be interesting, that it's worth as much as fiat. And he was giving you a big hint in the fact that, yes, Dogecoin is funny and it isn't inherently worth anything. But then again, neither is the US dollar or any other fiat currency. So why does cryptocurrency exist? Well, cryptocurrency came into being because people had the realization that some very powerful people were leveraging control of basically funny money that has no more intrinsic value than monopoly other than their willingness to be really brutal about forcing you to use it and in place of the US dollar. And so what they postulated was that in those two areas, what would you say, the store of value, which is one part of it, and the value of exchange, they would provide something better. So cryptocurrency developed with the idea that they would go ahead and create some value by creating artificial scarcity. It starts with Bitcoin and this idea that you have to mine the coins to have access to them. And so basically there is a finite amount of coins or a certain amount of energy, to be more technical, that has to be expended to get the coins, whereas the Federal Reserve goes money printer go brr. So the money is somewhat limited, and there are different mechanisms by which different coins work, but scarcity in cryptocurrency is greater than scarcity in fiat currencies. Advantage number one. Advantage number two is that some of these coins, as they've evolved, have a degree of utility. And what do I mean by that? That the coins themselves, as a form of currency, can convey certain information that has value to people. Bitcoin, not so much, but what Ethereum and other coins did was they created something called smart contracts, which was trading information from one side of the transaction to the other. So you could track through what's called the blockchain the whole time what's happening. So if you think of it this way, think of it like if if you ship a piece of luggage, that's a good place to think of the blockchain. And what it does is it allows you to track at each point of the way that it did what it said it did. Now, in real life, what happens is we use currency in this way where we constantly exchange money, and there is loss because it's an inefficient system. People have to keep extra money on hand, people have to spend extra money. There's a lot of middlemen. And finance is all about how middlemen make money between the way of where money's created and where money is spent. Governments do it in terms of taxes. Finance companies do it in terms of interest charges. But the blockchain is sort of interesting because the blockchain creates a situation where it's possible to create or to trace something from producer to consumer. And that's one of the most powerful things about it that people don't understand. It will eventually kill the existing currency racket. And the reason it will is because it has greater utility, which is to say it's a more effective exchange of value. It lets you know from start to finish where you went because what it provides is a much higher degree of transparency. Here's the catch. On the one hand, there are crypto ciphers that exist. It's on a 256-bit cipher, if I remember right, that allow privacy in your transactions, which people like for various different reasons. They don't want people to know their stuff. Maybe they don't want governments to know. Who knows? But they want to have privacy, and that's a basic thing. However, blockchain's real value is not in privacy because eventually quantum computing is going to break that anyway. We could get into that some other episode. But what will happen is it's the transparency of transaction from top to bottom that will cut out the need for people holding money. So you're asking, what's a real world example of this? The U.S. currency is propped up by the idea that other countries need oil to go ahead and buy, or need dollars to buy oil. But say you're China and you just want to use BTC to buy oil. Well, you can do a transaction that doesn't pop up on any market that will allow people to see start to finish where it goes, and you cut the dollar out. Once you cut the dollar out, the dollar uses utility, so it's not as much a store of value. So what happens is the value of the dollar decreases and things cost more. So when you're starting to see inflation and eventually hyperinflation in the American market, understand that is that the dollar is losing utility in respect to how it's competing against other things. And these cryptocurrencies that are out there, you could call them fake, and it's sort of true. But the problem is they're actually more useful than the fakeness that are out there. And the bet is that they will serve a better purpose. Now, who will be the successful cryptocurrency if you believe that? Well, I can't tell you which one it would be. I mean, I certainly have certain rooting interest in this, but I will tell you the attributes it will have, which is simple because we've understood the history of finance. You need something that's popular. You have the market leader advantage. That's why things like Bitcoin, Ethereum do really well because they're the biggest and most circulated coins. Not that they're better coins, they're actually not. They have other problems, but in the same way that McDonald's isn't the best food, it's everywhere and you know what you're going to get, so you go because you're used to going. Habits, human behavior play into the economics upon which finance, builds itself as a superstructure. What will matter, however, is the cost effectiveness, which is to say how much it costs to do transactions in a given coin, the popularity of the coin, the number of people who are using it, because it's no good having a coin no one will accept. Go try to pay for something in pesos and see what happens. And the speed with which it happens, because we are talking about a digital economy, and when you're talking about finance is largely conducted by computers at this point that are operating at rapid speed. So the people who are the big institutional actors are going to want things that are fast and cheap. So what you're looking for is a coin that has value, that's fast and cheap. So within this, there's two sort of big schools that exist in how should I put it, in how money is. Well, actually, I should say there's three schools in cryptocurrency about how you put money out there. Number one, you say there's a set amount of coins, whatever the amount is, and then those are the ones that are out there. No more will be added. However, you've created an economy that's really deflationary, which is hard to grow. Not too many coins do that, but some do as a store of value. Number two is you have miners, which is what Bitcoin and a number of other different models go for. And what they do is they create certain situations that have to be resolved to create more coins into the market. In the case of Bitcoin, it's solving abstract equations. There are other examples. It doesn't really matter what it is, but it's expensive because it requires the usage of quite a bit of electricity to go forward. Something to think about as we see governments around the world in this climate change agenda, Agenda 2030, saying that you're not, supposed to be using this so much energy, how much more expensive is it going to get to mine Bitcoin? Will that make Bitcoin worth more, or will that make the press against using it harder? And will that encourage the market to go into other areas? It's a big question, but if I'm betting, especially with institutional actors, they probably will go ahead and move into other areas, which goes to proof of stake coins. And it's just sort of like this. You have X amount of coins. It's like a savings account. You put them in there. You agree not to put them in the market. It stabilizes the market because that's not fluidity. In the same way that the US dollar is stabilized by people keeping money in their savings account. It serves as a deflationary pressure, which balances the coin against the inflation of the fact that you're creating more all the time. And it's actually shown price stabilization. Cardano's one coin I'm familiar with, but there are other ones. I think Polkadot uses the same sort of thing. Then you could see this. In fact, I think Ripple stakes too, if I'm not mistaken. Some of the bigger coins that are competing in that second tier, and you talk about the blockchains and the speeds that are going forward. Now, the other thing you have, and this is kind of a harder part because this is the part where the marketing comes in, is number one, how many people want to use a coin? Bitcoin is not a very good cryptocurrency. However, it's been around a while. People know what it is. They understand it in the cryptocurrency market, and it keeps value because it has a huge market share. For better or worse, but Bitcoin is I told my wife this comparison. She loved it. Bitcoin is Blockbuster Video. Ethereum is the equivalent of Redbox, and the up-and-coming coins, whether you like Polkadot, Cardano, some people like Tron, are like digital streaming. And there's early adopters, and this is how people are getting rich in cryptocurrency, right? What they're doing is they're finding the divergent technologies, the insurgent technologies, the disruptors, I guess you'd call them, that are going forward into these markets, and they're figuring out and they're investing in the idea that people will bet on certain attributes. Here's the combining part. Historically, people have thought of cryptocurrency as something that was created to develop privacy to get away from the fiat dollar. And that's a good point. It does provide for privacy if you have the smart contracts figured where you can go ahead and pick in a combination between transparency and privacy. However, that is not what's going to ultimately drive its value. What's going to drive its value is the fact if it's a better example and a more useful example for major actors to conduct business. And the interesting thing is, it's not really about the states. The states fear crypto, and it's not really about the individuals because individuals will flock to utility. We use all sorts of things which are suboptimal solutions. This platform being one example of it, Facebook being another. What it will be about is where the big institutional actors go, and by that I mean your big producers. If you have Apple, Google, these huge companies that produce the products we rely upon, and they start regularly using Google, or using a cryptocurrency rather, I should say, you will see it gain a lot more utility because you will be able to purchase the products, the actual physical material goods and services. And that's what economics comes down to in the end. Finance is a game played of leveraging control over economics, and where finance fails is when it becomes too far detached from the economic realities of what people want. Or in other words, when a dollar doesn't allow you to satisfy your needs, you don't care about it. And it can go two directions. Number one is deflation, which is there's not enough there where it's too expensive for you to do things and you can't. And number two is inflation, where you've made the money so detached from the actual material costs and prices of services and goods that it also has no value. There's a sweet spot where you want to reach, and this is what bankers talk about, where you want to have steady inflation at a measured rate, where that way you know that you'll be able to purchase things. There'll be price stability so that the emotional investment remains involved, that psychologically you can be careful and you can continue making those purchases. Now, as we look about who's out there, what we should look for as for successful currencies, I will tell you, are those which institutional actors like. And I will say the first actors who will go in, the ones that will be ultimately key are producers, but that finance, banks, and states will have a role to play in this, because if they create a path of least resistance where you don't have to get into the nasty politics of we're using force to modify your behaviors. Remember, all the state is the monopoly on violence. People may go into that direction, especially if it goes forward in utility. So what am I looking for in your winning cryptocurrency? Also, good morning, John. Good to see you. I'm looking for something that transacts quickly, that's cheap to use, that has a good balance between transparency and privacy, has growing and decent market share, has adaptability, has the ability for community engagement because you want it to grow, and it has institutional networking ongoing, because the idea that you're going to be the rebel currency, everyone loves the story of the rebel. Everyone loves the story of Sealand. There's a story from the 70s where people take over this oil platform in the middle of the North Sea and have a private radio station, and they're telling all these stories out to the people of England. And it's kind of a fun story, and it's exciting, and it's dramatic, and it's a footnote in history. The reality is, you are trying to create the oil to grease the skids. You think like Rockefeller did. Rockefeller, I'll tell you an interesting story of history, and this might be indicative of what you need to think about. Rockefeller supported women's suffrage to go ahead and create the idea because he wanted to have abstinence in America, because people were using ethanol to fuel machines. And most farmers liked ethanol as opposed to gasoline because they were already had a bunch of corn. They were already making whiskey. They knew how to distill. So they made distilling illegal to make ethanol illegal, because the goal of it was to get people to use gasoline. So when they went ahead and removed prohibition in the early 30s, what had happened was the whole country had switched to gasoline, and gasoline was a superior fuel, to be clear. Ethanol was only about, I think, about two-thirds as energetically useful. However, it was also something people could make for free or at relatively low cost, given technologies they already had on their farm. So the way things were disrupted is institutional actors were deployed, money was invested to lead to certain outcomes. So when you begin looking at cryptocurrency, you need to look at these plays that are happening. You need to understand the dynamics. For instance, China mines a whole bunch of Bitcoin because they want to destabilize the dollar. They understand the blockchain renders the dollar supremacy system of a reserve currency really, in the end, somewhat obsolete, because what happens is, for businesses, it's just cheaper, faster, and easier to use blockchain technologies. And so what we are going to see in the years ahead is the divergence of different currencies into different areas. So yeah, in a lot of ways, these coins started as a hustle, but if you begin to understand the technology behind them, and you really begin to understand that, which Elon Musk, I guarantee you, does, although he's just playing the market, because he understands that the expectations of the market is something you can hustle. If you know how to play the market right and you day trade, you can trade on the way up and down and make money on both sides of it, because you're just betting against people's expectations. And that's all currency markets are. They're the stock market on steroids, and they're betting where the odds are actually much better in your favor than betting on sports teams or something like that. That's absolutely true. However, in the end, there will be major winners. And this is a time where, if you make the right bets, you may have billionaires made from people who had no money at all in it, because what you're betting on is that something which does not yet have value will. And this is what, I talk about the last war. And the war is always a question of information and timeliness. You are flanking the market. You are flanking the financial establishment, and they are mad, and they are trying to leverage their power to send politicians against you. That's what's going to happen in the years, because states are scared to death of cryptocurrency. That's why they're going to have digital bank central currencies, and they're going to try to mandate people using them. And maybe they will, and maybe they won't. I'm sure they will exist as a basket of currencies. However, they will not have the value they had before, which means they will have to be managed much more responsibly. And that means we're going to be in a world where you can't just simply print money indefinitely and go ahead and have that budget go forward, which means the war states are either going to have to go away, or they're going to have to try to impose force more violently. And that's one of the dangers of the 20s. That's one of the reasons why, in fact, we saw in the 1930s, we saw World War II emerge eventually from the Depression cycle. And the bankers sort of play that, because what they do is they create false assets, which is finance to buy real goods. Because at the end of the day, you don't really get happy from money. You get happy from the things money gets you, but you don't realize it. If you don't believe me, having a bank account with $10 million in it where all you can buy is a potato, it's not that. But we don't understand, because it's a magic trick. It's a simple transference. It's ledger domain's the name of it. You switch what you transpose, what you think has value with what doesn't. And that's how cryptocurrency is going to eventually play. It's offering a challenge for sovereignty against the dollar. Now, here's the other thing now, and I want to put this out there because you all know I'm a little bit of a dark person, is that eventually the problem cryptocurrency is going to run into is the blockchain, especially coupled with technological augmentation of humanity in every part of the supply chain, will allow no privacy. And it's part of a hive society, potentially. So while it could be a good force for good, and in the short term, individuals can use it to go ahead and be successful, never forget that finance is ultimately just the leverage of temporary power over real economic behaviors. And that eventually what will happen is is if people's behaviors change, whatever financial wealth you've created will not have value. And it's the illusion, and it's always an illusion, by the way, it's always an illusion of real value that goes ahead and drives us. Because if you don't think something has value, then it doesn't, because choice is the heart of this. It's whatever your consciousness requires you to believe has value. And that is how people really need to understand cryptocurrency. Of course, they probably don't, but I put a little video up for you today because I wanted you to all have a very good understanding of what's actually out there, and understand these different coins that are out there. Because realistically, people are making, I mean, if you had invested, it's crazy, but if you had $1,000 in Dogecoin at the beginning of this year, you would now have $300,000. And there's a lot of people who had it's just a meme. And is the money fake? Well, your ability to spend it, minus whatever tax implications they have, get into financial analysis of what the state does with that. Theoretically, I think you're supposed to pay like 37%, but people do different things with that. But people are making real wealth, and you could say, "Oh, that's fake and that's BS." What do you think the derivatives market was? What do you think Wall Street has been doing? You can look at the growth of what happened in the U.S. Wall Street sector from up to 2008 is a good example of all these fake products they made. They were doing the same thing, creating quadrillions of leveraged wealth on what were realistically, I think I remember reading, the world GDP is like 17, 19 trillion dollars. That was before COVID hit. It went down since then. Let's call it 15 trillion just to be conservative. So you have quadrillions of dollars of wealth consisting of on trillions of dollars of assets. Or to put it differently, it would be like if you had $1,000 loan with $1 collateral. How stable do you think a system like that would be? And the answer is not very. So as you see, when you want to know what the practical outcomes of this is, what we have is currencies that are incredibly over leveraged, competitors that promise, hey, yeah, we're BS, but we're not as bad as that, and a system that is basically relying on force and habit to go forward. Now, the U.S. is still market leader. We still have a huge army, and I don't think your dollar is going to lose all its value overnight. But understand you are dealing with an asset that is trapped in an inflationary cycle where eventually it will have to be destroyed. The people who run the Federal Reserve know this. The people who run government, and I don't mean our elected officials, know this. And the people worldwide know this. So this is going to be one of the major transformations you will have to deal with. Now, whether or not they are able to successfully substitute some centrally controlled currency by existing entities, whether they are able to redefine what has currency meaning, which is what I think Facebook and other places are looking at doing. Potentially Amazon would be good at that as well. Maybe Weibo, Alibaba over there in Asia. You would see eventually that some of these competitors are going to offer different options, and it's up to the people. I mean, really, like take Dogecoin. Dogecoin's a terrible coin, but it's fun and people like it, and they're like, you know what? Let's drive it up, and they did. And some big whales obviously played a big role in that. But hey, they created real money because they believed it was true, and that's it. Believing is reality, and that's all there is to it. So I think that's a great place to kind of end this little morning soliloquy. But I wanted to say this, in the truth that believing is this, if you believe in the highest of powers, if you believe in the Lord of Lords, Jesus Christ, you will find that your life will get better and that salvation is something you can find. Because, like I'm saying, belief in really faith is what drives reality, and it's what drives your consciousness and what drives meaning. So I just want to remind people it's a Sunday, and I'm only talking about money to remind you that money is transitory and heaven is eternal. So please think about our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Spend some time in the Word today and realize money comes and money goes, but God is here always. After the world ends, the Word will continue. And that is what people need to understand. These are the secrets of reality that you are distracted away from ever understanding. So hopefully you take something from that, take it to the Lord. And you know what? I'm not a believer in prosperity gospel, but once you understand the systems of this world, they're not that hard to manipulate. You just have to have the courage to do so and the ability to go ahead and understand that, but never, never take the 30 talents of silver for your gold and for your soul, and don't be a Judas Iscariot. All right, God bless each and every one of you. I hope you have a wonderful day. Prayerfully consider that, and if you have questions, put them in. We'll do a show on Friday. I am currently without my computer because I am not good with using technology, but that's okay. I don't have to be. I understand key principles. We'll have a show on AI up hopefully by Wednesday over on Odyssey. Check out the big channel over there. Odyssey, At the Last War. I go deep into things other people can't even understand. I'm the hermit in the cabin. It's what I do. You get used to it. And you'll like the channel. Share it widely if you like it. You want to support us at CVCPRV is the Venmo. And I will put up a Bitcoin address or something if people want to make contributions like that. I'm actually thinking, just as a little aside, of writing a book called The Future History of Cryptocurrency, because I kind of know how this is going to go, and I think people would find value in that. But it'd be a shorter book because it doesn't need to be long. But I think that sometimes putting things in Word in an age when we're so used to being videos really adds a certain gravitas, depth to things that people need to understand. So let me just say thank you to everyone who's here real fast, just so I can say so. Good morning, Patches. Alan, good to see you. John, you are also good to see you here. Let's see. There's not cryptocurrency enough that could make up for what the value a mother has to her family. Amen to that, brother. I agree with that. And we really need to recognize where you place your value is what you will defend. As we go through uncertain times, make sure you place your value in the right places. Now I'm gonna go bring Dana a cup of coffee and some bacon, so I know where my values are. First with the faith, then with the family. Take care of yourself, folks. Have a good day. God bless.